There is a hum beneath the surface of modern life, a constant low-grade vibration of want, a restless energy that pulls us out of the present moment and into 1,000 imagined futures, 1,000 digital windows, 1,000 fleeting interactions. For many men, this hum has a specific frequency, a familiar rhythm. It is the rhythm of desire, not just the grand desires for purpose or meaning, but the incessant, whispering desire for validation, for conquest, for the momentary release that promises everything and, in the end, delivers only an echo. We are told this is normal, that to be a man is to be a creature of insatiable drive. We are sold a narrative of consumption. Consume experiences, consume validation, consume pleasure. And at the apex of this pyramid of consumption sits the sexual impulse, lionized as the ultimate proof of vitality, the engine of our ambition, the very core of our masculine identity. We chase it, we perform it, we build our social selves around it, hoping that in its gratification we will find ourselves. But what if this relentless pursuit is not a path to vitality, but a drain on it? What if the engine is running, but the vehicle is stuck in the mud, spinning its wheels, digging itself deeper into a trench of distraction and superficiality? What if the very thing we believe defines our strength is, in fact, the source of our deepest fragmentation? This is not a sermon on morality. It is not a call for a new kind of Puritanism. It is an invitation to an experiment, a psychological and spiritual expedition into the wilderness of the self. The price of admission is simple, yet for many, unthinkable. Stillness. Silence. A conscious, deliberate cessation of all sexual activity. Not out of shame, not out of fear, but out of a courageous curiosity to discover what lies on the other side of the noise. What happens when the hum stops? What emerges from the silence when the constant chase for gratification is put on hold? This is a journey into the profound psychological shifts that occur during a period of conscious abstinence. It is a journey informed by the deep wisdom of Jungian psychology, which understood that the energy we call sexual is far more than physical. It is the raw, untamed energy of life itself, and learning to master it, not by crushing it, but by understanding and redirecting it, is the path to true self-possession, to an authority that emanates not from a desire to control others, but from the quiet, unshakable sovereignty over oneself. This is the story of how a man, by stepping away from the hunt, can finally come home to himself. The first step is a disruption, a psychological pause. The decision to abstain is a conscious act of throwing a wrench into the gears of a machine that has been running on autopilot for years, perhaps a lifetime. The daily habits, the mental loops, the subtle and overt ways in which the world is scanned for potential validation, all of it is brought to a sudden, jarring halt. In the first few days, there is a void, an uncomfortable, deafening silence where the hum of desire used to be. The mind, accustomed to its constant companion, scrambles to fill the space. It replays old memories. It conjures potent fantasies. It screams for the familiar comfort of its distraction. This is the first test. It is the ego, the social mask, panicking at the withdrawal of its primary fuel source. Think of the ego, in this context, as a carefully constructed performance. It is the version of ourselves we present to the world to be seen as attractive, competent, and desirable. It is the witty text message, the confident posture in a social setting, the curated gallery of our lives on social media. For so many men, the architecture of this performance is built almost entirely on a foundation of sexual pursuit. The goal, spoken or unspoken, is to attract, to validate, to conquer. This pursuit gives the ego its rhythm, its purpose, its daily script. When you deliberately cease all sexual activity, you're not just giving up an act. You are firing the scriptwriter. The performance is canceled. The lights go down. And in the darkness, the actor is left alone on the stage, stripped of his costume and his lines. He is forced to ask the terrifying question, who am I without the applause? Who am I when I am not performing for anyone? This is where the transformation begins. The void is not empty. It is a space for self-discovery. The superficiality of the ego, which had been so convincing, is exposed. You begin to see, with startling clarity, how much of your energy, your time, your very identity was invested in this external game. You see how the pursuit of fleeting validation from others kept you from the necessary work of building genuine validation from within. This initial period is one of profound discomfort. It feels like a loss of direction, a loss of social rhythm, a loss of self. Many turn back here, unable to bear the silence. They rush back to the noise, to the familiar dance of desire and gratification, because the emptiness feels more dangerous than the cage they just left. But for those who endure, who choose to sit with the discomfort, something remarkable happens. The panic subsides. The silence ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher. In this quiet space, a deeper self begins to stir. This journey requires facing the silence, not fleeing from it. It understands that true growth is never born from comfort. It is born from the courage to confront the void we have been desperately trying to fill, only to discover that the void was the very space where our true self was waiting to be found. The cessation of sexual activity is not the end of a story. It is the catalyst that allows the real story, the inner story, to finally begin. To understand the power that is being reclaimed in this process, we must redefine our understanding of the energy itself. In the common vernacular, libido is a word that has been flattened, reduced to mean nothing more than the drive for sexual intercourse. But the great psychologist Carl Jung saw it as something far grander, far more fundamental. For Jung, libido was not merely sexual energy. It was psychic energy. It was the primal life force itself. Think of it not as a specific appetite, but as the raw, undifferentiated energy that animates your entire being. It is the force that gets you out of bed in the morning. It is the focus you bring to a difficult task. It is the spark of creativity that allows an artist to paint, a musician to compose, or an entrepreneur to build. It is the wellspring of your willpower, your passion, your drive to grow, to become, to connect, to create. When this energy is expressed primarily through compulsive sexual desire, it is like a mighty river that has been allowed to flood a single, small valley. The force is immense, but its application is narrow, often chaotic, and ultimately depleting. It creates a cycle of tension and release that consumes vast amounts of psychic energy but builds nothing of lasting value. The mind becomes obsessed, the focus is scattered, and the will is enslaved to the next momentary gratification. Life becomes a constant search for an outlet, a release valve for a pressure that never truly subsides. The practice of abstinence, in this Jungian sense, is not about damming the river. Repression is damming the river, pretending the force isn't there, pushing it down, which only causes the pressure to build until the dam breaks in a destructive, neurotic flood. No, this process is something else entirely. It is a conscious act of hydraulic engineering. It is the work of building new channels, new aqueducts, new turbines to redirect the flow of that powerful river. When the usual channel of sexual release is closed off, the energy does not simply vanish. It accumulates. At first, this accumulation feels like intense pressure, a restlessness that permeates every cell. But this is the raw material of transformation. By consciously choosing not to release this energy through the old, habitual pathways, you create the opportunity to channel it into new ones. Suddenly, you may find yourself with a surge of physical energy, a desire to push your body to its limits in exercise. This is libido being transmuted into physical discipline. You might experience a laser-like focus at work, an ability to solve complex problems that previously seemed insurmountable. This is libido being transmuted into intellectual power. You could feel a profound upwelling of creative inspiration, a desperate need to write, to paint, to build, to bring something new into the world. This is libido being transmuted into creative force. Understanding libido as psychic energy is a paradigm shift. It offers a framework for men to see that their vitality, their power, is not something to be spent and discarded in fleeting moments of pleasure. It is a sacred resource. It is the very essence of their potential. Sexual energy is not separate from the rest of life. It is inextricably intertwined with every aspect of it. To reclaim this energy is to reclaim your focus, your creativity, your will. It is to cease being a passive vessel for desire and to become the conscious director of your own life force, choosing where the river flows, and in doing so, irrigating the fields of your own deepest purpose. The journey inward is never a simple, sunlit path. To reclaim the energy of the river, one must first travel to its dark and hidden source. When the distractions are removed, when the ego's performance is canceled, you are left alone with what lies beneath. And what lies beneath is the shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is one of the most powerful and misunderstood concepts. It is the repository of everything we have repressed and disowned about ourselves. It is the dark side of our personality, not because it is inherently evil, but because it is hidden in the darkness of the unconscious mind. It contains our shame, our deepest fears, our rage, our greed, our primal instincts, and all the parts of ourselves that we deemed unacceptable to our conscious ego and to the society we live in. We spend most of our lives running from our shadow, pretending it doesn't exist. Chronic and compulsive sexual activity is one of the most effective ways to keep the shadow sedated. The constant cycle of fantasy, pursuit, and release acts as a powerful anesthetic. It provides a reliable escape from uncomfortable feelings. Feeling lonely? There's a fantasy for that. Feeling powerless? There's a conquest for that. Feeling the sting of shame or failure? There is a momentary oblivion for that. We use gratification as a release valve, not just for sexual tension, but for all the psychological pressure that builds from our unexamined lives. When you begin a period of conscious abstinence, you are deliberately, methodically shutting off this release valve. The pressure has nowhere to go, and so the contents of the shadow begin to seep and then pour into the conscious mind. This confrontation is not optional. It is the heart of the ordeal. It is dangerous, unsettling, and absolutely essential. Without the usual escape route, the repressed emotions demand to be heard. You may experience sudden, inexplicable waves of rage, triggered by the smallest inconvenience. This is the shadow's anger, long suppressed, finally showing its face. You might be flooded with a profound and bottomless sadness, a grief for things you never consciously mourned. You will almost certainly be visited by your deepest insecurities and fears, which now have no place to hide. Shameful memories from childhood, long buried, may surface with a startling and painful clarity. This is the point where the journey feels like a terrible mistake. The man thinks, "This isn't working. I feel worse than ever before. I am more anxious, more angry, more unstable." He is tempted to believe that the gratification was medicine, and that its absence is the disease. But the opposite is true. The gratification was the symptom, the anesthetic that allowed the underlying disease to fester in the dark. The pain he is feeling now is not the pain of sickness. It is the pain of healing. It is the pain of a surgeon cleaning a deep and infected wound. Jung's most potent warning echoes here. What is not integrated will manifest as destiny or psychological disturbance. If you do not consciously confront and integrate your shadow, it will run your life from the shadows. Your repressed anger will manifest as passive-aggressive behavior or sudden, destructive outbursts. Your unacknowledged fear will manifest as a life of timid avoidance and missed opportunities. Your deep-seated shame will manifest as a crippling need for external validation. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming the shadow. It means bringing these repressed elements into the light of consciousness. It means looking at your anger, your fear, your shame, without judgment, and asking, "What are you trying to tell me? What part of me have I neglected?" This process of acknowledgement is terrifying, but it is the only path to wholeness. By facing the dragon in its lair, you discover that much of its power was derived from the darkness. In the light, it is still a powerful force, but it is a force that can be understood, respected, and even harnessed. This confrontation with the shadow, brought on by the silence of abstinence, is the crucible where a boy's fragmented psychology is forged into a man's integrated soul. As the shadow emerges from within, the mask you wear for the world begins to crack from without. This is the breakdown of the persona, Jung's term for the social mask we present to others. It is the carefully curated self, the personality built around gaining social acceptance, validation, and, for many men, sexual attraction. This persona is fueled by desire. The desire to be seen, to be wanted, to be chosen. It dictates how we speak, how we dress, the jokes we tell, the stories we craft about our lives. It is the game, the charm, the entire performance of social engagement. When the underlying engine of sexual pursuit is switched off, the persona runs out of fuel. It doesn't collapse in a dramatic explosion. It crumbles quietly, subtly, but profoundly. The man on this journey starts to feel a strange sense of social dislocation. Conversations that were once easy and flowing now feel stilted and awkward. The witty comebacks don't come as readily. The drive to be the center of attention, to hold court, to impress, simply evaporates. He may find himself in a social setting feeling like a ghost, an observer rather than a participant. The rhythm is gone. The dance steps are forgotten. This can be a deeply isolating and confusing experience. It can feel like a loss of personality, a descent into social ineptitude. This is another critical moment of panic, another powerful temptation to relapse into old behaviors. The ego screams, "See? Without this, you are nothing. You are boring, invisible, undesirable." It begs for the familiar rush of a flirtatious exchange, the validation of a returned smile, the proof of existence that comes from being seen as a sexual being. But this collapse is also a revelation. It is a moment of profound insight into the psychological cost of societal expectations. The man begins to see, with uncomfortable clarity, just how much of his identity was outsourced. His sense of self-worth was not an internal, stable pillar, but a fragile structure built on the shifting sands of other people's opinions, particularly the opinions of potential romantic partners. His confidence was not true self-assurance, but a form of stage presence that required a constant audience. In the quiet that follows the persona's collapse, a new foundation can be laid. It is the beginning of discovering a self-worth that is independent of external validation. It is the search for an identity that is not a performance. Who are you when you are not trying to impress anyone? What do you truly believe? What do you truly value when you are not tailoring your personality to be more attractive? This process uncovers the authentic self that was buried beneath the mask. It is often a quieter self, a more observant self, a more centered self. It is a self that does not need to dominate a conversation to feel present. It is a self that can listen deeply, because it is no longer waiting for its turn to perform. The shattering of the mask is a necessary death before a rebirth. It is the painful, humbling process of letting go of who you thought you were in order to discover who you truly are. It reveals the profound psychological cost of living a life dictated by the need for approval, and in its wake, it creates the space for a personality to emerge that is not a tool for seduction, but an authentic expression of an integrated and sovereign soul. Here, at the heart of the journey, having faced the void, understood the river of life, confronted the shadow, and witnessed the shattering of the mask, the real work begins. The accumulated psychic energy, the potent libido, must be channeled. This is the art and science of sublimation. Sublimation is not repression. This distinction is the most critical key to sustainable self-mastery. Repression is an act of fear. It is the attempt to deny desire, to push it into the basement of the psyche and lock the door. But the energy never disappears. It simply mutates in the darkness, turning into anxiety, depression, and neurotic compulsions. Repression is a battle you will always lose. Sublimation, on the other hand, is an act of courage and creation. It is the conscious and deliberate redirection of raw, primal energy into higher, more constructive pursuits. It is not about denying the fire of desire, but about becoming a master alchemist who can take the raw heat of that fire and use it to forge something new. It is the transformation of the base lead of compulsive impulse into the refined gold of focused action and creation. This process requires immense self-control and unwavering intention. The energy that was once scattered in 1,000 directions, through endless scrolling, through fleeting fantasies, through the constant low-level hum of sexual pursuit, is now gathered into a single, potent reservoir. Sublimation is the act of opening a sluice gate from that reservoir and directing its immense power toward a chosen purpose. This is where discipline becomes the ultimate expression of freedom. Not the freedom to indulge every whim, but the freedom from being ruled by those whims. The man who is a slave to his impulses is not free, no matter how much he gratifies himself. He is a prisoner in a cage made of his own compulsions. The man who can master his impulses, who can choose where to direct his life force, is the one who is truly free. He is the master of his own inner kingdom. What does this look like in practice? It is the writer who sits down and channels his restless energy into finishing a chapter, pouring his passion and focus onto the page. It is the athlete who takes the raw aggression and drive within him and transmutes it into one more repetition, one more mile, pushing past the limits of his physical endurance. It is the artist who stands before a blank canvas and allows the chaotic, powerful emotions churning within him to flow through the brush, creating beauty out of turmoil. It is the entrepreneur who channels his relentless ambition not into seduction, but into building a business, solving a problem, creating value in the world. It is the spiritual seeker who redirects the longing for union with another person into a longing for union with the divine, with truth, with the deepest reality of existence through meditation and contemplation. This redirection of energy transforms a man from the inside out. The energy itself is refined. It changes from a source of constant distraction into a source of unwavering power. It is no longer a force that pulls him apart, but a force that integrates him, focusing his mind, body, and spirit on a single, chosen point. This is the essence of mastery. It is the courageous act of taking the most powerful, primal and chaotic energy within you and, through discipline and will, transforming it into a tool for the creation of your highest self and your most meaningful life. This is not a denial of life. It is the ultimate affirmation of it. The culmination of this entire journey. The stillness, the confrontation with the shadow, the integration, the mastery of sublimation, leads to a state of being that can only be described as sovereignty. This is not the sovereignty of a king who rules over others, but the far more profound sovereignty of a man who is the undisputed ruler of his own inner world. It is the ascension to an inner throne. This state of sovereignty is a palpable presence. It is a calm, centered authority that emanates from a man who is no longer at war with himself. His ego, the part of him that needs to prove itself, has been demoted from a tyrant to a helpful courtier. His shadow, the repressed and feared part of him, has been brought out of the dungeon and now serves as a wise, if sometimes grim, advisor. His spirit, his true self, is what sits on the throne, making decisions not from a place of emotional reactivity or compulsive need, but from a place of deep, quiet clarity. The sovereign man does not need external approval because he has cultivated an unshakable source of validation within. He is not tossed about by the winds of public opinion or the fleeting validation of others. His sense of worth is not dependent on his success, his social status, or his romantic conquests. It is an intrinsic quality of his being, forged in the fires of self-confrontation and self-mastery. This inner authority manifests in his every action. There is an economy of motion, a lack of nervous, wasted energy. He speaks with intention, because his words are not designed to impress but to communicate. He listens with presence, because he is not formulating his next performance but is genuinely open to the other person. He moves through the world with a sense of purpose, not because he is chasing something, but because he is embodying something. He is a man who is whole, integrated. This is the psychological wholeness that Jung called individuation. It is the process of becoming an individual, literally, undivided. It is the integration of the conscious and unconscious, the ego and the shadow, the masculine and feminine aspects of the psyche into a cohesive, functioning whole. The man who has achieved this state of inner sovereignty redefines power. He sees that true power is not domination over others, but possession of oneself. It is the ability to remain calm in the midst of chaos, to act with courage in the face of fear, to choose your response rather than being a slave to your reaction. This is the quiet strength that inspires trust, the steady presence that provides a safe harbor for others. He is no longer seeking a queen to complete his kingdom. He is a king who can welcome an equal queen into a kingdom that is already whole and thriving. This is the ultimate prize of the journey, not a temporary pleasure, but a permanent state of being, the quiet, unshakable, and profound peace of the man who has finally come home. The journey into the self does not end in solitary contemplation on an inner throne. The hero, having descended into the underworld and returned with its treasures, must re-engage with the world. The man who has undertaken this period of conscious abstinence does not become a hermit. He returns to life, and often he returns to intimacy. But the nature of that return, the quality of that connection, is transformed. It must be stressed that the abstinence described here is a deliberate, conscious practice, undertaken as a tool for growth. It is not an asceticism imposed by shame, guilt, or fear of one's own nature. A man who has journeyed this path does not return to intimacy because he is once again succumbing to an old compulsion. He returns as a conscious choice, from a place of wholeness, not from a place of need. When he does, the experience is qualitatively different. Intimacy is no longer an act of consumption, a way to use another person to quell an anxiety, to fill a void, to validate an ego. The desperate, needy energy is gone. In its place is presence. He is able to see his partner not as an object of gratification, but as a fellow sovereign being. The interaction is not about taking, but about sharing. It is not about a frantic release, but about a deep and conscious connection. Because he has faced his own shadow, he is not afraid of the shadows in another. Because he has cultivated his own inner validation, he is not trying to extract it from his partner. Because he has integrated his own psyche, he can meet another person in their wholeness. The sexual act itself can be transformed from a purely physiological release into an expression of consciousness, a profound communication between two integrated souls. It is no longer a flight from the self, but a celebration of it, shared with another. This entire journey offers a profound reinterpretation of male sexuality and indeed of masculinity itself. It challenges the shallow cultural narratives that equate a man's worth with his sexual prowess or number of conquests. It suggests that true power, true vitality, lies not in the frantic expenditure of one's life force, but in its conscious cultivation and masterful direction. The path of abstinence is a mirror to the hero's journey. It is a voluntary descent into the darkness of the psyche, a confrontation with the dragons of the shadow, and a battle for the mastery of the self. It is a path of chaos that leads to a higher order. It is a process of breakdown that precedes a breakthrough. It is not a journey of deprivation, but of transformation. It is a disciplined, courageous confrontation with the self that ultimately leads to a freedom far greater than the freedom to indulge any impulse. It is the freedom to choose your purpose, to direct your energy, to build your life with intention, and to connect with others from a place of authentic presence. It is an invitation for men to stop chasing fleeting shadows on the wall and to turn inward, to discover the unshakable light of sovereignty that has been waiting there all along.